activities. So as we all know, the internal auditors are considered as an expert in controlling operations in the companies. So maybe the management value the internal auditors' rules in managing some, managing environmental strategies. Therefore, internal auditors should involve in sustainability activities in the company. Oh, it's very slow. I'm sorry. In this line, Gray et al. 2014 actually examined the internal auditor's role in green IT activities. However, interestingly, they found that even though internal auditors consider that they're supposed to involve in green IT activities, in reality, they really didn't involve in green IT activities. Especially they examined the internal auditors in United States and Canada. Then why there is a gap between their perceived role and their current involvement in green IT activities? In this paper, actually we examine the reason why there is a gap between their perceived role and their current involvement in green IT activities. To do that, in this paper, we examine the regulations regarding the sustainability reporting. So we believe that if there is a more demanding regulations about the sustainability report, then internal auditors might be motivated to involve green IT activity more actively. So we compare the internal auditors' attitude and involvement in Australia, Canada, and the United States. Because even though those countries are sharing some common components, such as they all English speaking and Anglo-Saxon, and they share the common law history, Australian has way more demanding regulations regarding sustainability report. So based on that, we consider that maybe Australian auditors might more actively involve in green IT activities. Our finding is actually we could not find any partly significant difference between those countries. So based on this result, we can provide some contributions on a body of internal audit research. For example, IAA actually frequently highlight that internal auditors are supposed to involve various kinds of activities outside of audit reporting activities to increase their value the value of internal auditors in the company. However, in reality, many previous studies found that the internal auditors are minimally involved in the activities, especially in IT-related activities such as XBRL and Green IT. That means maybe their encouragement might having some hurdles. So we need to examine the reason why those encouragement cannot be realized. So those are our possible contributions. Sorry. So as I mentioned earlier, we tried to examine the strength of enforcement regarding sustainability reporting. So each country establishes the sustainability-related regulations differently, and these differences in enforcement mechanism actually affect the society differently. So especially previous literature found that mandatory sustainability reporting regulation tended to motivate management to take social responsibility more seriously. Based on that, the strength of mandatory regulations, mandatory sustainability reporting regulation might affect the management to involve green IT or sustainability activities. So unfortunately, there is no study comparing the sustainability reporting regulations over the countries. We utilized these metrics from one of the report from KPMG. So they provide the metrics to categorize the strength of regulations into 3 categories. So depending on the scope of regulations, on scope of impact on corporations, they categorize 3 components. One is generic, second is sector specific, and the other is the thematic. So the generic is affecting widely on the corporations. So as you can see, US and Canada do not have any generic rules regarding mandatory sustainability reporting. On the other hand, Australia has 3 regulations considered as generic regulations about the sustainability reporting. So I mean that those all the mandatory sustainability reporting. However, each one's having a different scope of the impact on organizations. So those are classified based on the impact. Especially Australia, let me give you guys one of the example. Under ASX listing rules, companies should disclose whether they are substantial exposures to environmental risk or not. So if they do have, then they should disclose how they manage this risk. Even if they do not have any risk regarding the environmental risk, they still need to disclose the reason why it is not. So this is one of the strong regulation regarding sustainability reporting. So as I mentioned earlier, we hypothesized that once the environmental effect is very strong, in this case the regulation is very demanding, then maybe it affects the company's, organization's behavior. Then finally, it would affect the employees, including internal auditors' attitude regarding the sustainability activities. Based on this, we hypothesized that 4 different things. Basically, we tried to see internal auditors' current involvement in green IT activity might be different over 3 countries, especially it would be great in Australia. And the internal auditors' perceived roles in green IT activities in Australia would be greater than other 2 countries. And the internal auditors' current involvement aligned to their perceived roles in green should be involved in green IT activities. That's basically based on the Gray et al.'s 2014 paper. And finally, we try to compare the magnitude of alignment between internal auditors' perceived roles and their current involvement in green IT activities. So we just assume that the magnitude of alignment between 2 components in Australia would be greater than other 2. To test our hypothesis, we conduct a web-based survey. So basically, the survey has the 38 overall questions. And the questions about all internal auditors' role and current involvement and their perceived role and company strategies. Actually, we got a little bit lower response rate about our survey, and overall 771 auditors involved in our survey. And unfortunately, some part of observations are incompleted. So we dropped those. And finally, we got 420 observations total. So based on 422 observations, we test our hypothesis. So as I mentioned earlier, our questions are about the internal auditors' current involvement in green IT and their perceived role in green IT and environmental sustainability green IT strategy in organizational level. So basically, green IT activities are classified into the 4 different levels, such as the design specification for green IT activities and design controls to monitor green IT activities, monitor controls, and provide assurance for green IT activities. Here is the demographics of our participants. So as you can see, 331 participants are actually from United States. And 48 are from Canada. And 43 are from Australia. And most of the organizations are having the revenue or exceed 100 million, and most of them industries are finance, service, and public administrations. Very interestingly, found out the motivating force for green IT is different depending on the country. So most of companies in the United States are motivated to involve green IT because of the reducing operational cost. And on the other hand, Canadian companies are motivated to involve green IT activities because of the regulation. And finally, Australian companies are motivated to involve green IT activities because of the reducing cost and the social responsibilities. I thought those are very interesting results. These are our statistical description or descriptive statistics about our measurement. First of all, I really want you to see the last 2 columns, last 2 components of those charts. The first one is the auditor's current involved in green IT. Second chart is about the perceived role in green IT. As you can see, the current involvement in green IT is definitely smaller than their perceived role in green IT. This trend is very obvious in other activities in assurance and controls. So this is the monitoring control rules. You can see that there is a huge difference between their current involvement and their perceived role in green IT. That means auditors actually consider they're supposed to involve green IT activities. However, in reality, they do not really participated in. They are not participated in green IT activities. So here is our result. We could not find any significant result among 3 countries. We actually conduct ANCOVA test based on previous literature. We control the firm size, industry, and strategy. As you can see, the country component is not playing on any important role to understand the internal auditor's current involvement in green IT. And second hypothesis is similar. Except developing and the designing specifications, most of the activities we cannot find any differences among 3 countries. And this one, we tried to compare between their perceived role and their current involvement in green IT activities. As I mentioned earlier, we can find all the countries are consistently different among those 2 components. That means whether it is Australia, Canada, US, all auditors consider auditors are supposed to involve in green IT activities, but they do not actually involve in. Finally, we tested the magnitude of alignment between internal auditors' current involvement and their perceived role. Except designing and developing specifications, we cannot find any differences. I mean, the country component is not statistically significant in this model. Okay. In conclusion, even though the Australia, Canada, US are sharing similar components such as same English speaking, Anglo-Saxon, and sharing the common law history, the Australia government has dealing with the sustainability reporting very well. I mean, they value the environment very much. So we can see their attitude in their regulations. On the other hand, we cannot find any significant differences over all countries' auditors. That means especially the internal auditors' current involvement in green IT is very low, and those are not statistically different over the countries. Yes, we have some limitations about this paper. So response rate is very low, and our participants are very, very uneven over 3 countries. Most of the participants are from United States. This would be our limitations. So in terms of our future research, it might be very interesting to do the same survey for some different kinds of countries, non-Anglo-Saxon or non-common law countries, like such as Asian, China, things like that. So it would be interesting to see whether it is different or not. So that is all my research. Thank you so much for participating in my presentation.